At my peak, I was betting at least 50 times a day, and now I haven't placed a bet since April 16th, 2024. I think back to when I first started gambling, and I never really did any fantasy sports. I did it with my buddies for $20 for the year or something like that. Like, I didn't even really like it. My lineups weren't filled in half the time. And I never really had an issue going to casinos. I definitely went to the ATM to withdraw one too many times on a given night, but I went maybe two, three times a year. And then at the time, sports betting wasn't legal in Illinois. So I didn't place my first sports bet until I ended up getting introduced to one of those bookies that, has a white collar job, and you use that weird, janky website with a crappy login, and it's just a terrible website all around. But that was my first experience with it, and I was terrified to bet heavy. And I remember the first time I was down, I did a pretty large parlay on a two-team parlay, and it hit, and I climbed myself out of the hole. That was probably the very first experience that I can think of where I took a huge risk to get out of debt. And then it really just kind of spiraled from there. I mean, with bookies, right, you settle every week, and it turned into one of those things where on Monday, I either owe money or I'm getting paid. So I knew going into the weekend, I either had money to press because I was up from the week betting, or I was down and I had to chase, and I'd have to bet the board to try and get back to even. So no matter what, I wasn't able to manage it. I mean, of course, yeah, sometimes I did, and it wasn't, if I was down $200 going into the weekend, I wasn't chasing like crazy. But I knew the experience of needing to bet on the Sunday night football game and hit the over and the spread and the money line to try and not have to owe. But where it really started getting out of hand is on Monday, for example, I might be up big, and I knew he had to collect money from everybody else in order to pay me. So instead of just waiting until the end of the day on Monday, I knew I had this bigger bankroll to start with during the week. And with that bankroll, I would take a huge money line favorite because, those huge favorites never actually lose. And that was the first time that I placed a bet on soccer, which I did not know at that time because I hated soccer, that it's a three-way bet. So there's three outcomes: win, lose, or draw. It's not a push if they tie. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take Man City or whoever because they're huge favorites and there's no shot they lose. And if they draw, then I'll get my money back. Well, sure enough, they drew, and I lost all that money. And again, instead of just saying, all right, whatever, start the week fresh, I tried to make it all back up within a couple of hours before I got paid. So I actually ended up owing my bookie money because I gambled through whatever I was in profit from the last week, and then I lost my regular bankroll or credit line. So I kept doing that, and the benefit of using the bookie at first, right? You don't have to put the money up front, but that becomes an issue. You rack up debt. So then I'm setting up payment plans, making up all these stupid excuses, or just going dark on them for weeks at a time. And typically when I'd go dark on them, it just meant that I tried to find another bookie to use and win my money back, which, again, once in a while, did it work? Yes. But most of the time it didn't because I was trying to win it back really quickly. So then I owed 5 different bookies at once. Eventually, I'd taken so long to pay bookies that they started making me put money up front. So now I had to come up with the cash beforehand, which turned into me taking out loans and doing those stupid ass payday loans for, 8,000% interest. And that created a whole new mess. It totally shocked my credit. But that was all prior to the apps being legal. So once the gambling apps became legal, I thought, okay, well, now I don't have to worry about weekly cash in or weekly cash outs. I can just go as I please. And again, the same thing happened. I would find myself chasing, I'd find myself pressing bets, I would withdraw money Um, I'd withdraw money and then deposit it again like 30 minutes later. I had accounts at every single app that was available because I'd do a cool off period for DraftKings for, 6 months or whatever, and then open up FanDuel. And at one point, I had locked myself out of every single account. But then I was driving to visit family across state lines, and I, on accident, found out that even though I am excluded from one app in Illinois, that same app does not have the same exclusion when you cross state lines. So then I threw out, whatever, a month or two of not gambling just because I found it on accident. And I didn't know any of this really at the time, but I found out that I was dealing with some pretty severe depression. And, to this day, I don't know which came first, whether depression caused the gambling, gambling caused the depression. I'll probably never know that answer. But the one thing I do know is that gambling made everything 10 times worse. Every loss stung so much more than it normally would have because I would be down so bad, I knew I couldn't stop. I had to keep going within each bet or within each week. And it turned out that anytime I lost a bet, I'd say, this is the last time, and I'm just going to end my life, probably. And I'd feel so negative. And the other part is, I was kind of known as the gambler among my friends. So, of course, I'm going to lead into it and talk about it all the time, and it's damn near impossible to avoid gambling. So when you're so isolated, you don't quite know you have this problem, or maybe I just wasn't willing to admit it at that time. You have a problem that's there, and you can't talk to anybody about it. And you also can't talk to anybody about what's going on inside your head. And I shouldn't say I can't talk about it. I didn't know how. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I was feeling because ultimately I just felt completely numb. And really the only time I ever felt totally alive is when I was gambling. So I had been theoretically self-medicating with gambling without even knowing it. And I even convinced myself of the lie, right? I just love sports that much. Why are you watching Weber State versus Utah State on a Wednesday night in February in college basketball? Well, I just love college basketball. No, clearly I bet on it. And you start telling all these lies, and you're lying to your friends, your family, and that all really starts to add up and take a toll on you. So not only am I not sleeping, I'm not eating, I lost a ton of weight, I have these super, super negative thoughts, work's not going well, and that I attributed to anything but gambling, and I'm lying my face off. So I've been self-medicating with gambling or putting a Band-Aid on a cut that I didn't even know existed, which probably played into a big role as to why the gambling got so out of control. And frankly, looking back on it, the real reason I ended up stopping is because I was found out. I was so good at hiding finances, moving money around, the lying. Nobody had any idea it was an issue, partially because I didn't even think it was an issue. So effectively, I got found out. I ended up going to an inpatient treatment center for about 4 weeks. And that's where I found out I was dealing with depression. And it was pretty wild because once I started getting treated for the depression and doing therapy the right way, everything just lifted. The other part is now my family and a lot of my friends knew about this problem, so now it's not such a secret anymore. So I'm a huge believer in our secrets make us sick. And once that secret was lifted, it was like just immediate relief. I actually put 10 pounds back on in a week. Like I couldn't stop eating. And also when it came to therapy, like I remember being in therapy initially prior to going to treatment, and we talked about sports betting, and I lied my face off to that guy. Like of course I wasn't getting any better with that therapy because I wasn't being truthful. And part of that was I didn't think I had a gambling problem. So he'd ask me about it, and it's, $50 here or there. Meanwhile, I had my like rent money on, it was virtual therapy. So I had him on one screen, and then I had my other computer screen where I had a live game that I was streaming where I had, my rent money on it, while telling him, yeah, I don't think I have a problem. Like, it's not a big deal. But I was gambling sun up to sundown, and even when I was asleep, I had action. So the first week that I stopped betting actually was like really good because I was in this place where I didn't have access to a phone. I didn't really have access to TV, or at least live TV for the most part. And it just got me off that roller coaster that I wouldn't have been able to get off of by myself. So when I get a lot of messages from people saying like, how did you stop? How did you do it? It's not a one size fits all thing. For me, it was make sure that I get the other part treated and understand why I was gambling. And I came to that understanding through therapy because I didn't know that I was doing it because I didn't know I was depressed. And so one of the hard parts about, getting out of treatment and working on yourself and all of that is you have to not only work on yourself, but you have to work on rebuilding trust with your family and people that you hurt. And that's hard and it takes time and it's frustrating. It's not a fun feeling to not have access to any of your bank accounts or have a credit card because I turned all my finances over as a part of the deal. And that was probably one of the best things that I ever did. But nonetheless, I'm an adult and I wasn't acting like one, but it's a whole different feeling and ball game when you literally can't go buy a Gatorade at the gas station without somebody being like, "Hey, what's this about?" But I needed that. And I started going to Gamblers Anonymous a couple of times a week and still do. But I also recognize like this is really, really hard. I think it's wildly different than drugs and alcohol. You can watch TV all day without seeing a commercial for beer. I don't even know if they have those anymore for the most part. And the drug commercials, they're not promoting weed, they're promoting pharmaceutical stuff. So, but you watch ESPN, every other commercial is gambling. You watch a game, all they talk about is gambling. They have the live spread all the time. I mean, FanDuel is, I forget which NBA team they sponsor, but their patch is on the court in jerseys. So in the US, it's way behind. And then you start it compared to like Europe, where there's no gambling advertisements during live sporting events, is my understanding. And then, you have your streamers. Those guys promote gambling like crazy, and people aren't realizing what's going on behind the scenes. Like, have you ever thought about why Drake has steak all over his stream? Well, it's because he's got a massive contract with them. You drive down 94 outside of Chicago, every other billboard's a gambling billboard. It's crazy. And I know I was one of those people that was always like, oh, advertisements never convinced me to do anything, but I'm sure it did, like, subconsciously. And then again, your group chats are all buzzing about it, and you have this problem that nobody really knows, so you don't want to be the odd man out. Like, I was sitting at a bar a couple months back, and is a sports bar, and there's like six guys in their 20s huddled around one cell phone watching a game when there's 50 TVs, but that game that they very clearly bet on wasn't on one of the TVs, and they're hooting and hollering. And I get it. I get the fun in that. I get the camaraderie and, being a part of the group. But imagine being the one guy in that group that's got a massive problem that he can't tell anybody about, and everyone's asking him who he likes in the game. It's so hard to completely isolate yourself. So when you're not only dealing with gambling, which is incredibly isolating, and gambling often co-occurs with some other type of mental issues, what do you do? That's why you follow people like my account, or there's a ton of people talking about recovery online these days. So, You know, recovery didn't just change how I live, it changed everything about me. I mean, I got back into working out. I have a structure. I plan out my entire day. And this is specifically in early on recovery. Like, I planned out every half hour of my day, even my work day, because I know that when my mind gets bored, that's when those urges pop up. That's when you're like, maybe I can just throw a little bit on this game. So those are the types of things that I'm going to make more content about and videos about. And I guess if you're, I'll just end with this. If you're trying to